Welcome aboard! We will be your guides during this magical journey into the movies. It's the perfect job for us because we love the movies. It's showtime! Ready when you are, CB!
Action!
Welcome to Monoreel Radio, episode number 279. I'm Sean.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are here this week to review and discuss 10 Things I Hate About You as it celebrates its 25th anniversary.
Even though I am feeling so old that this movie is 25, I can't even tell you how excited I am to talk about it. This has been one of my all-time favorite movies since I saw it back when I was 13. Spoiler alert, I think it holds to this day. But I cannot even express how excited I was when I realized that this was a Touchstone film and that we would be able to talk about it for the show. We rearranged the schedule so that we could get this in.
True story. This was one that I think I saw, somebody rented the VHS and I saw it at somebody's house and I half paid attention to it and I didn't really care that much about it. It's actually one that I revisited in my mid-20s, which I think was probably a good idea because I had a bigger appreciation for it watching it at that age, and then I didn't watch it again until we sat to watch it for this discussion. I can count on one hand how many times I've seen this movie.
Formative staple movie for me.
But oddly enough, to your point, this is probably the oldest I've ever felt talking about a film. How many times, I can't believe it's the 30th, I can't believe it's the 35th. But, I know that, we own a home, we have a dog, I know that I'm not 6 years old anymore. But because I remember this being such the phenomenon.
Right.
And because, I don't want to spoil too much either, but to put it lightly, and we'll delve into this more later, this movie is so much a product of its time in many ways. This and Can't Hardly Wait, American Pie, all of those high school slice of life go to prom movies were all very trendy at this time.
For sure.
And because, like you said, formative years, I remember it so vividly. This is the oldest I have felt.
I think, too, with this cast especially, obviously we're going to talk about them, because they've evolved and they, by and large, were unknowns when they were cast in this film. To see the evolution of this cast and some of the roles that they've been in since, whether it's a big blockbuster film or a really deep, meaningful role, I think being a part of watching these careers take off is also what makes it you feel the longevity in that.
Yeah, well, I think that the movie is a product of its time. Jackie feels like it's timeless. Is it, in fact? Do we land somewhere in between? That, on top of many other things, is what we are here to discuss today.
This episode is sponsored by Fierce Fox Co., designers of handmade silkscreen shirts. Fierce Fox has a t-shirt, tank top, hoodie, or crewneck for every fandom. So whether it's the movies or theme parks, princesses or villains, the MCU or Star Wars, everyone will find something they love. The designs range from subtle quotes from our favorite films to iconic characters we can wear proudly in so many different styles, such as sketchbook and concert tees. Listeners of Monoreel Radio can get a 20% discount using the code Monoreel at checkout. Visit fiercefoxco.com to check out all of the collections.
Cameron James is a new student at Padua High School in Seattle. He meets and befriends Michael Ekman and develops an instant crush on Bianca Stratford, a popular girl whose father refuses to allow her or her offbeat sister Kat to date. Cameron sees Joey Donner, a selfish senior who wants to date Bianca as well. However, his intentions aren't as pure as Cameron's. Walter Stratford, the girl's father, tells Bianca that she can date when Kat starts to date. When Cameron tries to ask Bianca out, she tells him that she can't date until her once popular sister does, so Cam and Michael work to find someone who would date Kat in order for him to be able to go on a date with Bianca. Cam singles out Patrick Verona, an Australian student with a bad reputation, and suggests paying him, however they have no money. Michael suggests using a financial backer, so he goes to Joey and convinces him to pay Patrick to take Kat out. He tells Cam that Joey will be thinking that he's calling the shots while Cam can make his move on Bianca. Kat turns down Patrick's initial advances and bickers with her father about where to attend college. Michael and Cameron tell Patrick their true plans and offer to help him impress Kat. Cam and Michael invite everyone to a house party at Bogey Lowenstein's house, unbeknownst to Bogey, who recently wronged Michael. With help from Bianca, they get their intel and pass it along to Patrick, who bonds with Kat over her tastes in music. He invites her to go with him to Bogey's party. After Bianca begs her, Kat agrees to go to the party, and when they arrive, Bianca only pays attention to Joey, upsetting Cam. A frustrated Kat gets drunk at the party and makes a scene, and after falling from a table while dancing, suffers a concussion. Bianca grows frustrated with Kat and Joey and attempts to leave the party. Meanwhile, Patrick takes care of Kat following her fall. After her friend Chastity ditches her for Joey, Bianca asks Cameron for a ride home. After he calls her out for her selfishness, she kisses him and goes inside her home. Meanwhile, Kat starts to fall for Patrick, who turns down her advances as she is still drunk. With prom around the corner, Joey continues his pursuit of Bianca and pays Patrick $300 to take Kat. Despite initially pushing back, Kat is convinced to try things again thanks to a spirited performance by Patrick. Following a paintball date, Patrick and Kat finally kiss, and Patrick tells Kat that all of the stories regarding his reputation are false. She rejects his invitation to prom as she doesn't believe in the ritual. When Bianca asks Kat why she won't go to prom, since everyone else is, Kat admits that she had previously slept with Joey to give in to peer pressure and swore to never do that again. Kat eventually gives in and goes to prom, as does Bianca with Cam. At prom, Bianca learns that Joey only wanted to sleep with Bianca. Joey, upset that Bianca went to prom with Cameron, exposes the truth to Kat, who leaves heartbroken. Joey punches Cameron, but Bianca punches Joey 3 times, and they continue their night. Back at school, Kat reads her version of Shakespeare's Sonnet 141, titled 10 Things I Hate About You, which was a assignment that she had been given earlier in the film, in which she admits to still loving Patrick. He buys her a guitar with the money that he took from Joey to make amends, and they kiss.
I love how you describe one of the most iconic scenes in this film as a spirited performance by Patrick. Goodness, that is reductive.
Listen, I'm just going to say this to you now. I have gone back and listened to some of the earlier episodes of Monoreel Radio. And while I'm very proud of them, those plots could have 3 minutes shaved off of them. And that has been my goal for like the last year, is to kind of expedite the plots so that we can get into the discussions. You've either seen the film or you're going to see the film. Like 5 years ago, roundabout when we started this podcast, longer than that now, it would have been, and then Patrick went on the bleachers and performed a song by Frankie Valli, and he this, and he that. Like,
oh,
let's go.
I'm all about the editing. It's what I do. That's totally fine. But you can't, the scene is on a pedestal. It's a huge character moment, and it's a spirited performance. Well, we'll get there when we get there, because there's a lot that happens to lead us up to that point. You mentioned at the top of the show that all of these high school movies, particularly ones that were centered around the prom, had become like their own genre at this point. There were so many. Like you mentioned, obviously, American Pie, Can't Hardly Wait, but I think the closest comp that we have is She's All That.
Yeah, I forgot about that one.
And that's more of a Pretty Woman, Cinderella story. Here, this is more specifically an adaptation of Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew. It's not a direct adaptation, but the pitch for this film was, let's take Taming of the Shrew and modernize it to a high school movie. And I wanted to start there because, you know, I think that that's so important to this film's setting and particularly the way that it's written. I think a lot of the dialogue, because there are certain lines that sound very Shakespearean and some that they did pull right out of the play. I don't think that you get away with that without Dawson's Creek's existence at this point too. And, we talk a lot about on the show, especially lately, about writing to kids and not insulting their intelligence. And I think that that's one of the things that I loved about this movie from the jump, was that it was so elevated as far as the writing, and they weren't afraid to go for it. So I love that they didn't dumb this down for anyone.
Yeah, it's exactly what they would do nowadays. It would just be something that was utterly ridiculous.
You'd never get something like this.
No.
So it being a product of its time, we open with two incredible songs. I love the transition that you get 1 week over the opening credits, but then as we zoom in and get closer to this Seattle area town, we see that they're blasting 1 week by the Bare Naked Ladies from a car, and then Kat pulls up next to them and she's bumping Bad Reputation. I think it's just such a great introduction to the film, a great introduction to the character, and it's just a really nice transition.
I think the introduction for all of these characters is spot on. I feel like we get to know exactly who these characters are from the moment they come on the screen. And I mean, some of that is they are kind of on the nose stereotypes, archetypes of... And this, they existed in all of these 90s high school prom movies, right? But, like, not in a way where it felt redundant, and not in a way like it felt like you were pulling too much from something else. They were just very familiar, and we knew who they were, and I didn't think that they needed to spend too much time developing them, because they do enough of that in their intros.
I agree. You get these background characters that have such strong personalities, and I feel like, to your point, that was definitely a trope of the genre, but none of those characters ever felt the same. But I feel like that's especially true in this film, because they punched up these side characters so much, none more so than Mrs. Perky, or Ms. Perky. I think this film must hold the record for the most developed character with the least amount of screen time.
Yep.
Because you know exactly who she is. She's a guidance counselor. She obviously doesn't like her day job because she's daydreaming the day away writing smut novels. And that would never fly in a school today, especially because she's on what I'm assuming is the school's laptop that she's writing this stuff. And then she's also, incorporating it into some of her quote unquote inspirational guidance speeches. She would absolutely be fired today. This would never happen in real life, but gosh, she's a great character.
Sometimes it's just okay to be funny. And sometimes it's just okay to write comedy. I know in 2024 we can't do that anymore, because we can't be funny, but sometimes it's okay to just be funny and entertaining. Disney would never make this movie today, by the way. The language... See, here's the thing. You took high school kids, you gave them cigarettes, you gave them beer, you made them curse, and you made them, some of them, promiscuous. So in other words, you wrote high school students as high school students, not the sanitized, sterile version of what you want them to be, which none of them can relate to, and now we won't do that anymore. I understand that Mickey Mouse does not want to promote smoking cigarettes, but high school kids are going to do that regardless of whether they're told to or whether they're told it's bad for them. They do it knowing it's bad for them. Like, there's a lot in this movie that I think a more modern audience, a younger audience, I think they're going to see and hear some things, and it's in these intros too, where I think it's going to make them uncomfortable. They're not going to be able to connect with it. Frankly, I sort of miss the authenticity of films like this. I don't think you get a lot of movies aimed at tweens or teens that feel very authentic anymore.
I agree with you that kids might have a hard time relating to this now. And I think that's because of the ways that society has changed. Like when you and I were growing up and when we were in high school, everybody was very much in these cliques, not necessarily the ones that are represented here by the archetypes, but, you know, especially if you were with the same kids in elementary school, in middle school, by the time you got to high school, everybody kind of had an idea of who you were. And you were sort of, I mean, maybe this was just my experience, you were sort of pushed into these cliques based on other people's judgments of you. And now I think that between social media and having an online presence and putting up this persona of who you want to be, compounded with everybody wanting to be a lot more tolerant and accepting of what people identify themselves as, I feel like the high school clique is going to be lost because it's not really like that anymore. And there's a wonderful thing about that. I mean, like, online bullying is absolutely unacceptable, but I do think where there has been some positive change is that you are a lot more free to be yourself without having to be labeled. But for the context of this film, I think that this is one of the greatest introductions to the high school setting that we've seen since Clueless. Yes, it is a little bit of a trope where you get the new kid and he finds a sort of mentor figure and the mentor is going to show him the ropes and show him around and tell him who you want to hang out with, maybe who you don't want to hang out with. So I love the walkthrough here where Michael is showing Cam around. And I think what really makes it more than anything else, and we are going to talk about the actors, but just for the sake of making the point, I think part of it is just the performance by David Krumholtz here, because his character of like being wise beyond his years and being happy being sort of the curmudgeon-y old man at the age of 16, it's just so well done. And I think that that's what lends to making this feel different than all of these other high school movies that we've seen before.
I would agree. I love how he introduces everybody around him. I love how he describes Bianca because we don't know anything about her, and yet we know everything about her all at the same time.
I also love how you get the line from Cam, "I burn, I pine, I perish." This is one of those perfect examples of how they were able to sneak the Shakespeare in without having it feel clunky. And it's just so seamless because I'll buy that from his character. You know, he's just completely love struck. And even though no high school age kid is really going to talk like that, it totally conveys that Bianca's out of his league. But doesn't matter. It is your entire setup right here.
I also like that every time they incorporate a Shakespearean line, they either there's a character that's there that either tells them to stop talking like that, or they brush it off like, yeah, okay, whatever, and they move around. You know, they keep going. So it doesn't seem so jagged, and it doesn't seem so fake, because in reality, if a 16-year-old said that to you, you'd look at them kind of crooked and say, okay, and move about your business.
It's very self-aware, and I think a lot of that also comes from, you know, now we get to the classroom setting. We get another great character introduction to the teacher, Mr. Morgan. Again, this is another one, the way that he is speaking to these children where he's entirely over it, and he's not going to take anyone's crap. He'd be fired today. However, I love that these kids are trying to dish it out and he's not going to take it, and he will put everyone back in their place.
I like the character. I like how the actor plays him, but I think he's too young. Because I remember the first time I saw this movie, I thought he was another student giving a presentation. He looks like he just graduated high school himself.
See, I'll buy that, though, because I think that they were trying to convey the teacher that's going to level with these kids, because they're all, I mean, Kat's a little bit different. Obviously, we're going to talk about her. She's into poetry. She's into writing. You know, this is an outlet for her. But I think that they're sort of setting up why she cares about it, and you need to give her someone to relate to. If it's if it's too much of an authority figure, you know, she's a rebel. She rebels against her father. She doesn't care what her guidance counselor has to say. The only one that she sort of respects is her coach. So I think that there was a very fine line here where you had to give her, even though it is an authority figure, you had to have someone that she would like. And I think part of that is this is also a product of its time. When you think about something like Boy Meets World and a Mr. Turner character, you had the teacher that was going to relate to kids. You had Feeney, who's going to be that source of wisdom, but you also needed to give them a mentor that they were going to actually care to listen to. And I think that that's sort of what this entire character is. And that's why, you know, Kat, the day after prom, is not going to blow off his assignment.
The only thing that I don't care about in regards to everything that you just described is that he's in a room filled with kids who clearly do not want to be taking that class. Kat has an opinion about everything. She's self-righteous, but at least she's engaged.
Yes.
And it seems like he doesn't even want to hear her speak. Like, in most high schools, in most classroom settings, there's always that one kid that has to raise their hand after everything. And you can tell that the teacher's over it after a while, but there's still a level of appreciation that at least somebody is paying attention and trying to be engaged.
That's a fair point, but I think that they're walking a very fine line here because Kat is so isolated. So if he does sort of take a liking to her because she's the only one who's participating, you know, you're not going to take that as far as her becoming the teacher's pet, but I think you still need him to have a wall up where he doesn't care about anyone, including Kat, where he's not even going to recognize that she is trying, that she does care about this subject, because you really can't have her. This whole movie is about peeling back the layers of the onion and exposing her. She's got way too many walls up, so you can't even give her some kind of ally at this point.
How do you feel about the introduction to Patrick? Because we get him very briefly in the classroom here.
I love that his reputation precedes him. I think that that was so smart to build him up with all of these crazy rumors. And we do get a little taste of it here because he's late for class and then he dips right back out. So you know that he's going to be the rebel. But we haven't seen him do anything so bad where we're going to dislike him at this point. It's all hearsay. And I think that that's a great way to develop this character too, where we're going to peel back his layers and realize that he's not so bad and he's, you know, not nearly as troubled as everyone's making him out to be. So we go from this classroom scene that felt very modern at the time, and they managed to pull us back to the Shakespeare in the next scene because we're outside. Just on the location alone, it feels very Shakespearean because they chose the location of this school that's got, I mean, it's enormous, but it's got turrets and it feels very Elizabethan. And it was all done very intentionally once they chose to remove the film from California. One of their fears was that this was going to feel too much like Clueless. And to me, in some ways, it still very much does. Once we get more into the Stratfords and their home and the wealth and all of that, that all feels very Californian. And they didn't really do themselves any favors by having this set around the prom when it's almost summer and you've got kids walking around in flip-flops and short sleeves and tank tops. So it does still very much feel a lot like California, but that is why they did choose Seattle to shoot in, so that it wouldn't feel so much like a retread of a very popular movie. And when they saw this school, they had a couple of locations to scout. As soon as they saw this one, they knew that they were going with it. And it's perfect.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a real school. So it obviously makes sense that they shot there, because there was one movie where I remember seeing the school and I'm like, there's no way that's real. That's not a real school. I think it was high school, Teen Beach 2, when they put them in that high school, like on the ocean. And I said, this is way too on the nose. We get it. It's California. We get it. You surf. But this is not real. This feels like an old school, like you said, turn of the century. You know, it has that architecture. It's stunning, and it feels like a school that's been there for over 150 years.
Feels very Ivy League too.
Yes.
So they're also shooting over the summer. Part of the reason for that is because they wanted to use the school in its entirety. So they have to do it while the kids aren't there. But they only got a week to do all of these exteriors. And learning that blew my mind. I can't even imagine how tight this schedule was when you've got to do, obviously, the big band scene with Heath Ledger. But there are so many exterior shots. It's wild. But I want to talk about this next scene that we get, because this is one of my favorite scenes. So we get a little bit more exposition from Michael. He's out there with Cam. He's still showing him the ropes, and Bianca walks by, and she's in this sundress. And I love how this scene is shot, because there's kind of a back and forth between Cameron and Michael, and they have two completely opposing points of view about Bianca. And part of this is Michael, I think, genuinely trying to save Cameron from heartbreak and tell him, she's out of your league. Don't get invested. And Cameron is arguing that she's so sweet and innocent, and he really thinks that she's the girl next door. And Michael says that, she's dressing like that, but it's intentional to make us want her, even though we're never going to get her. And I just think that this is such an interesting dynamic, because obviously we know that Cameron's love struck, but it adds another layer to Michael's character, because he's sort of coming off bitter, because that is the girl that he's never going to get. And what does he do? He projects onto her and takes her down for what she chose to wear that day. And all the while, the camera is like circling the two of them in this conversation. And it's just so well done, because we've hardly heard any speaking lines from Bianca at this point, and we really don't know what the truth is about her and who's right. And I think they're kind of both right and both wrong.
Yeah, all at the same time. And then we do get a peek behind the curtain when the girls get home from school and we meet their father. He's extra. Like, we've seen this character 100 times over, the overprotective father. But this guy is borderline unhinged.
He really is. I mean, it definitely works for the comedy, but there are points where it's so over the top. I just kind of watch and I'm like, why don't they just lie to him? I mean, Kat has no reason to, because Kat doesn't care. She doesn't want to be out doing these things. But in Bianca's case, why is she telling him exactly where she wants to go? Like, that's kind of the name. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but I mean, like, come on. Everybody's snuck out of their house in high school. Everybody's lied to their parents about where they were. So that's again where I think the scene before this does such a great job of setup for her, because she is sort of playing this sweet and innocent role, right? Daddy, I I'd like to go on a date. She's really playing that up. But then we're also going to see her lie, not to her father, but to Cameron.
Well, this is the thing. Like, I'm glad that you bring this up, because to circle back around to what you said before is we don't know much about Bianca at this point. We don't know how much is real, how much is fake. I kind of like the fact that they keep her very grounded and that she doesn't just lie. Because I think that if that were the case, if she were the typical high school kid that did lie and did sneak out, other than being completely relatable, I think the problem is that you make one of your leading ladies far too dislikable, because she's going to snoop around her sister's bedroom with another boy in a few minutes, go through her underwear drawer so that she can set it up where Kat gets out, asked out on a date. She doesn't know exactly what the plan is, but she also doesn't care, because
Right.
she just cares about going on a date. And she knows that it's Cameron that wants to ask her out, but she really wants to go out with Joey. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, she could so easily be dislikable. And I think that moments like this, I don't think she's coming off as fake. I think in moments like this is where you keep her innocent enough where the audience will still root for her.
Right, because she is kind of two-faced. They just sort of set it up in a more subtle way. Like I was talking about the dress, it's very subtle. I mean, I've watched this movie hundreds and hundreds of times, but I didn't catch it until this latest viewing. At school, she's got the sundress on and it's just spaghetti strap. It's modest. She's not really putting anything out there. But then at home with her dad, she's got a cardigan over it. So those are the ways that they're sort of setting her up, where you don't really know what the truth is. You don't know if she really is as innocent as she is portraying herself. And it makes the lies and how she's treating Cameron that much worse.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I do love, obviously Cameron is being very earnest. He's got this idea of, or once the rule changes that Bianca can date when Kat dates. And he offers during the French tutoring, I'll find someone to date her so that I can take you out. And to your point, you said she knows that that's his motive. I love Michael coming up with this idea of Joey as a backer. I think it's such a great way to tie it all together. My question becomes, though, why does Michael care? When he pitches this to Joey, he wants better social status. He says to him, as he's drawing a phallus on his face, if I say hi to you in the hall, you say hi back. But my question remains, throughout this film, why does he continue to help Cameron? He is such a good friend to Cameron, and Cameron treats Michael as bad as Bianca treats Cameron. Cameron doesn't really do anything for Michael. He hangs with him. He goes to the party with him. They're kind of just set up. They're buddies for sure. But Michael is the one to set up the bet and incorporate Joey. Michael is the one to get a party thrown so that Cameron has somewhere to take Bianca, even though his ulterior motive there is revenge against Bogey Lowenstein. But Cameron, what have you done for him lately?
Yeah, Cameron, you're right. The door doesn't swing both ways in that relationship. But I love Michael. I love how he describes a backer, somebody that gives us money and is not smart enough to know what we're really doing. The whole thing is great.
It's so great.
I think something that dates the movie is when Joey goes to Patrick and pitches the idea and offers to pay him. And Patrick starts breaking down the cost of what it would be to take her to a movie. Kids nowadays are never going to understand that you used to be able to go to the movies, 2 people, tickets with snacks for $20.
But the pricing that he's giving Joey so that he gets paid more is accurate for today. I love this scene because it's so great to see Joey eat it in front of Patrick after what he just did to Michael. The way that Michael went to him sort of hat in hand, pitching him on this idea, is now how Joey has to go to Patrick. I want to ask you something, though, because for as many times as I've seen this film, I can't figure it out, and I think that that's the beauty of it, and I think that this is sort of intentional. Do you think that Patrick had his eye on Kat the whole time, or is he just liking the challenge? Like, forget the money. He seems to know who she is. I mean, they have spoken in English class not but 2 scenes ago, you know? So he clearly knows who she is. He's out having a smoke on the soccer field. They point her out. His reaction's not no.
I think he's intrigued by her. I think that he sees a lot of himself in her. I think he recognizes the fact that she, sort of like him, is a cast out, and that there is a reputation that precedes them. But I don't think that he would have pursued her had this not been on the table. I think that she's just somebody that he recognized, he found interesting, and that's about as far as it went.
I think money aside, I think it starts out obviously as he just wants to see if he can do it. But after watching her on the soccer field, how she handles herself, I think he's intrigued by her more so than just, could I potentially have a shot with this girl? I think it becomes more about Kat than the challenge in this moment.
Yeah, I agree. I like how they do set this party up with Bogey Lowenstein not realizing that his house is about to be invaded. I like that moment for Michael. I like how they just take the flyer and throw it down the stairwell in the school. And
It's
how somehow...
so well shot.
It's so well shot.
So well shot.
But
That's where you really utilize that setting of that school.
Somehow, some way, everybody in school knows that this party is happening, except for the 4 people that are actually going to be at the wine and cheese party.
Honestly, this is probably my favorite 90s trope of all time. Of you hear that a kid's parents aren't going to be home, ipso facto, party at their place. And the kids are so self-governed. They just show up with everything that they need. But the attention to detail in this movie is just so incredible, because Bogey goes up to answer the door and he says, "That must be Nigel with the brie." But Nigel is there with the brie. He's the first one in the door just getting trampled. Like, they just deliver on everything. It's amazing.
It is amazing. I love a good 90s party scene. I love everything about a good 90s party scene.
And this house, too. I feel like... I think the Stratford house, I think that they shot on location because they're using both the interior and the exterior. Here, I think this is probably a set just because it's so big and there's, you need to get cameras in everywhere, especially when Kat is doing her iconic dance on the table. That's shot from all angles.
I've never seen Save the Last Dance, but hearing you just a couple of weeks ago talk about the Julia Stiles Juilliard audition, I'm looking at this, her dancing on the table, and I'm like, I don't know, she looks pretty convincing here.
I'm not saying that she's not a good dancer. What we've come to realize about Save the Last Dance is that...
Is it an awful movie? I've never seen it, so I don't know. But is it one of these things that, like, has aged into being terrible?
Oh, don't make me do this. Don't make me do that movie dirty, because I still love that one too. But we're going to have to sit you down and watch it. If you want a good, like, product of its time movie, no, you're going to enjoy it. Kerry Washington's in it. Is like one of her early roles. No. You're going to watch this. No, the gripe now with Save the Last Dance is that she, quote unquote, infuses hip hop into her ballet audition. And at the time it was like a revelation. And now you watch the choreography and it's like, that's what got you into Juilliard. Like, that's what did it. However, this table dance is what got her that film.
I believe it.
But I love this scene. Well, I go back and forth. I love it for Kat. I don't like it for Bianca at all. This is one of the only areas where I feel like in a film that is otherwise so beautifully character driven, we're losing some of their motivations. Like, we know why Cam is disappointed. He orchestrated this whole thing so that he could be at this party with Bianca. And what happens as soon as she gets there? She goes off with Joey. Okay, that checks out why Cam is upset. It sort of checks out why Kat is upset because she's trying to protect her sister from Joey. Obviously, we don't know that she's been with Joey at this point. So I get why she's annoyed, but I feel like there have been so many other things done to her at this point. You know, like she slams her car into Joey's because he parked behind. You know, he's been more of a jerk to her already than he was in this scene. So why is she so triggered by it where she goes and gets completely smashed? That doesn't fully add up to me. And what really doesn't add up is why Bianca seems angry at Cameron. And if the argument is that he's not stepping up to the plate and she wants to be asked out more formally, or she thinks that he needs to man up or whatever, that's not good enough. And that's where, for all of the subtleties that we've talked about with Bianca, as far as her sort of playing both sides and acting sweet and innocent and then lying, this is where there's sort of a line drawn because she made her choice to go with Joey. So I feel like she needed to own that a little bit more. And I don't really fully understand why she's mad at Cameron.
I think that this is one of the rare instances in this film where you have a poorly written scene. Because I think that what you did was, I think your intention was to make us feel bad for Cam.
And they do.
Yeah, but in doing so, you sacrificed one of your leading ladies, who we're supposed to be rooting for this entire time. It's, there's just something about it that I think is weak. You know, like, Tara Reid in American Pie is getting pressured that entire movie, right? And eventually is willing to give in to that peer pressure. But there's a push and pull with her the entire time where she's resistant. She is, at the end of the day, she's a good kid in that movie. With Bianca, I don't think that you get the push and pull. I think you get a character that at times acts without motivation. And I think that this is one of those moments where she just acts without motivation. Because she knows that the whole reason why Kat is even at this party, the whole reason why all of this is happening, is so that Kat can go with Patrick so that Cameron can go out on a date with Bianca.
Yes,
Cameron's
when she
right
dates,
in front
you
of you.
date.
Right. Cameron's right in front of you. He is there at the party that he helped organize. He got your sister out so that you can go on the date with him. But Joey, there's you. I know we need to feel bad for Cam, but they had to figure out a better way to do it.
I would agree, but to your point about sacrificing one of the leading ladies, I'm okay with it because now there is sort of a shift where Kat's been sort of villainized the entire time. Now we're sort of villainizing Bianca, and I'm okay that that happens. I'm just not okay with how we got there, because where this scene feels really clunky for Bianca, it's wonderful for Kat, you know. And I'm not just talking about the table dance moment. For her and Patrick, this is pushing them forward. He, you know, he's got the bad boy reputation, so he's not going to take advantage of her. We see a much softer side of him where he's taking care of her, even though, you know, she's puking all over herself. he makes sure that she's good, and not just as far as being drunk, but the other thing is he wants to make sure that she doesn't have a concussion,
Right.
and he's trying to keep her awake. So anyone else with this bad boy reputation would have taken advantage of a girl in a situation like that. And I love what this does for him, being a perfect gentleman and like genuinely caring for her and making sure she gets home okay.
Yeah.
So I like that now there's this shift of we're feeling sympathetic for Kat and not so much for Bianca after we see her not only treat Cameron like dirt at the party, now she's got to go to him hat in hands and ask for a ride home.
Yes, and I think that all of what you just said is important because we now fall in love with Patrick because we need to root for him.
Oh, well, we already fell in love with Patrick from the second he came on screen.
Good on you. So here's the thing. You needed that because up until this point, he's there because he got paid to be there. Like, in theory, he's not really that nice of a person. He's not authentic at all. You needed this to happen. You needed him to want to take care of her. You needed him to turn down her advance on him because he respects her, knowing that she's drunk. You needed that moment for him. You also needed the moment for Bianca to be served that slice of humble pie.
Yes.
You needed that for Cam. You needed that for her. And what I think they do well is she's turned on by being told how selfish she is. She's turned on by him calling her out for her flaws. We know that because she grabs him and kisses him right there in the car. It's such a great moment for the two of them. And from that point moving forward, you're all about Bianca and Cam. Like, that was a very quick roller coaster ride, but they do a good job in sort of rehabilitating the audience perspective on her.
Right, because essentially she did everything that Michael said that she was going to do. She lived up to everything about her reputation as a selfish person. And now the second that somebody actually had the courage to stand up and call her on it, she's going to be authentic with them and be genuine with them. So it is a good redemption arc for Bianca. I do disagree, though, with what you said about up until this point, we haven't seen a softer side of Patrick, because what we sort of skipped over is when they're doing all of the recon for Patrick, when they're doing all of the recon on Kat, there is a really nice friendship forming between Patrick, Michael, and Cameron. And you do get that quick little beat at the party where everything is falling apart on Cameron, and Patrick encourages him and says, do you care about her? Is she worth it to you? Then go for it.
Yeah.
So that's where we've started to peel back that he is a pretty stand-up guy. And we also sort of rushed past this too, that, when they were doing the recon on Kat, they found the concert tickets. He goes to pursue her at the club. He's watching her dance at the club. The club, by the way, that they're not allowed to date, but they can go there.
Yeah, I know.
That's really the only other clunky thing about this movie, is it never made sense. And, they clearly picked setting over story in this case. But that's where we see Patrick genuinely take a liking to her. And they double down on it once he brings her back home. And she realizes that he's a good guy. She puts herself out there. And to your point, he respects her too much to kiss her. And she completely takes it the wrong way. And could you blame her? She's never put herself out there for anyone like this before. The last time she did it was Joey, and it blew up in her face. So now she's ready to maybe take this chance again. So of course she's going to get angry when it's not reciprocated. And then, you get this another really great Shakespearean line where Michael and Cameron, again with this friendship, this odd friendship that they form with Patrick, they're giving him advice now. And Cameron tells him, she put herself out there for you. Now you have to sacrifice your dignity, or I think he says sacrifice yourself on the altar of dignity.
Yeah.
Basically he's telling him he really needs to make a big gesture to win her back. And that's what he does in probably the most iconic scene of any teen rom-com ever.
Maybe. There's so many of them. This is not one that comes to the top of my list.
Are you serious?
It's not.
What you got? I have to know. Like, what do you think is better than this? I'm not saying it's the best, but when you think teen rom-com, is it the most iconic scene comedically? No. But if you're talking about, you picked an incredible song choice. Heath Ledger is really singing, which is amazing. You're utilizing the setting of this amazing school that you found so well with the pole. The pole was an ad, by the way. That wasn't there when he does the fireman slide down the pole. But otherwise, you're utilizing these bleachers by having the security chase him. Like it's just so well done across the board. Getting the band in, like everything. It is perfection.
I'm not saying the scene's not great, but I don't think it's the most iconic scene out of a teen rom-com.
I think what this also does is just ruin high school relationships, because I think that that's part of the problem, is that no guy is going to do something like this for you. But seeing this movie when you're 13, it's like you have like a false hope that you're going to have this gesture, and every guy is going to fall completely short in comparison.
Well, I think now, if there's anything actually that I think a modern audience will connect with, it's these stupid promposals that are now viral. This is the kind of thing that would happen.
This is a good promposal.
And
yeah,
this was
I agree.
before that
so
was a thing.
Huge.
I think they're so stupid. I think that they're too showy.
Guess I wouldn't have gone to prom with you if I knew you in high school.
Well, I guess not. This is another thing. There are two moments in the film where I think that the writing is weak. I just went over one with Bianca. This is my other problem. There's no clear timeline in this film. I'm thinking, up until this moment, I'm thinking this is the beginning of the school year, because Cameron has just transferred in to a new school under the guise of Army brat.
Right.
I get the feeling that he's only been in this school for a week, at best 2, and we're already going to the prom. I find it impossible, not hard to believe, impossible to believe that a kid is going to transfer into a new high school for the last 3 weeks of the school year.
Yeah, because they'll never catch up with the material.
Correct.
I mean, if we're looking at this completely realistically, like, yeah, how are you taking your final exams and you're just having transferred in? You don't even know where they are. Like, what if it was an entirely different curriculum?
You could have just as easily set this around a homecoming dance and no one would have been upset that you didn't do it around the prom.
I mean, here's the thing. I think for Kat, you need the stakes of prom because it's a big dance, and, her whole thing has been, I'm making a statement by not going. And I think it's very fitting of the character of, she's not going to take part in something that she finds to be like a lame tradition. But for Bianca, it could have been any dance, especially because here's what I don't believe. You ask your dad, who is not going to let you go, on like a day's notice. This should have been, if they had even stretched this out over the course of like, say, a month or so, this should have been Bianca's motivator from the beginning. She wants to date so that she can be asked to prom eventually. And after everything falls apart with Joey and she realizes that she doesn't really want to be with him anymore, she still wants to go to prom and she'll go to bat and she'll ask her dad so that she can go with Cameron. But it would have been nice to see her fighting for prom so she could have that experience the entire time. Instead, the only lines we get that show that she's invested is when she's having the argument with Chastity, and Chastity sort of calls her on it, and she's like, what, you thought you were the only sophomore that got invited? This has been sort of a statusy thing for Bianca this entire time. So now that she's got her way, and now that we're supposed to be rooting for her with Cam, they sort of swing the pendulum back in the other direction because she thought she was the only one in her age going.
Yeah.
And it becomes less about being there with Cam and being happy to be there with him.
How do you feel about the way that they develop the relationship from in between the promposal, so to speak, and the prom itself? How do you feel they do with pushing the relationship forward with Cam and with Patrick, or with Kat and with Patrick, I should say?
I mean, I love the way that it develops. Another iconic scene is obviously Kat breaking him out of detention, which would never happen now. This is another great moment of attention to detail because the coach can't sit on the desk because Bianca shot him with an arrow in an earlier scene when she's in gym.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really funny. The irony here is that if this were for real, Kat's trying to break Patrick out of detention, and what she did would get her expelled.
Yeah.
She's a minor.
Right.
In high school.
Well, we don't know
flashing a teacher.
Well, we don't know that she's not 18.
She's
a senior.
Julia Stiles was 15 filming this, so she's absolutely a minor. But yeah, if she's portraying a senior, if she had a birthday already, she could very well be 18.
Well, mind you something, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, we'll talk, talking about another iconic teen rom-com. Jennifer Jason Leigh was, I think, 22 in that. Well, she was 22 years old when she shot the movie, but she's supposed to be 16. And she's got multiple scenes where she's fully exposed in that movie.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how there was that shift where it's like, to your point, she would be expelled. We don't know that she's not 18, but we know that she was 15 when she shot the movie. So you've got a 15-year-old shooting as an 18-year-old doing what was not illegal if she was 18. It's just so interesting when you turn the other way, because people now watch a movie like Fast Times and they can't believe what they're seeing. And they're like, but she's 16. It's like, right, but the actress is 22. Isn't it funny how, like, they think one way about one, but they don't put the pieces together when it comes to the other?
I think that's become sort of an issue with the modern movie-going audience, is that everybody is looking at things so literally and they want so much authenticity. And there's got to come a point where it's like, we're making believe, folks.
It's
called acting.
Yeah.
But all of that aside, forget about what the real life repercussions would be. Forget about, the age of the actors. As far as what this scene means to the characters, I totally buy this for the relationship, because now you've had Patrick make this huge gesture. She's got to kind of meet him halfway, especially because you go back to what the root of her character is. She's a very hardened person. She's got to do something big to return the favor. She's got to really put herself out there to show that she cares about him too. So I buy that. And then I think the scene is really cute. I like the boat out on the water, and I love the paintball. This was another scene that like ruined High School Boys for me, because nobody would ever do anything like this. This was so cool. And again, it's like the location scouts should have won an Oscar for this film, because they found the coolest places.
And all the while, we're just waiting for the House of Cards to come crashing down around him.
Right.
I feel like the movie's well paced. It's very well paced, actually. But I kind of feel like we rush into getting to the prom.
Yeah, the end comes at you kind of fast. And I also feel like this scene where, leading up to it, when Kat comes clean to Bianca about why she hates Joey so much and why she rejected her reputation as the popular girl.
Yeah.
I feel like it would have been more effective for Kat if it maybe had come a bit earlier, because it would have made a bigger deal of her choosing to let Patrick in.
Agreed. And I think that you also needed to give it a little bit more breathing room.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, flashing a teacher to get out of detention, like that does set up the fact that she cares for him and she's willing to do whatever it takes to be with him. But you could have also achieved that by seeing this conversation, and it would have given us a bigger understanding for what a big deal it is. Not only that she's wanting to be with Patrick, but just choosing to be with anybody at this point after what she's been through.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it also would have softened Bianca a little bit earlier on too, by having this heart to heart, even though it does end with her being mad at Kat. The only other interaction we've seen with the two of them is where Kat calls her out for wearing the mom's pearls, which is, by the way, very confusing because Bianca says it's not like she's coming back to get them. So the implication is that she's
dead.
passed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in another scene, they're talking to the dad and they tell him that you can't keep trying to box us up and protect us just because mom left.
Right.
And they also, this is another attention to detail moment, or another attention to detail win for this film. Kat ends up wearing the pearls to prom. So you can, you know, they've buried the hatchet between the two of them. But I feel like, yeah, to your point, maybe they could have reshuffled the deck with these last couple of scenes and it would have allowed it to breathe a little bit more leading up to prom, especially because they do no favors again with Bianca asking on like a day's notice if she can go.
Correct. I think that the moments at prom, I think they're very well done. I think they're well paced. I don't think we needed to spend more time at the prom. It's the prom. They're going to dance. Patrick gets exposed for what he's done. Joey gets his comeuppance. We're done. It didn't need to be more than what it was. I liked that moment for Bianca.
Me too.
You know, I like the fact that, talk about something that for its time was, I think, sort of evolutionary, but they didn't need to put themselves on a pedestal or throw a parade for themselves, which is what Disney would do today. It's Bianca that avenges Cameron
and Kat.
But I don't forget about that. I'm talking specifically about Joey punches Cameron. Cameron goes down. He's bloodied up. And it's the date, the female, that comes in and beats the crap out of the bully, so to speak. You know, the abuser, so to speak. They did that low key, and it's a great character moment for Bianca, right? If that were the thing today, you'd have this film is groundbreaking. This is revolutionary. It's just so interesting to me how critics, and to a lesser extent, Disney, and the movie-going audience would make this such a big moment in the film when it sort of is organically. I don't need you to tell me that it is, because I know that it is.
Right. But it is also such a huge moment for her character, even though they do sort of spell it out. I do love the lines.
Yeah.
That she gets 3 hits in, and that's for making my date bleed, that's for my sister, and this one's for me. It shows that she now has clarity, and it shows which side that she's on, because we've talked about her playing both sides, and now she's come to the realization of not only is Joey a total jerk, but this is her owning what a horrible person that she's been and how she's treated people. So she had to do it. I mean, she had to be the one to give him the comeuppance. It wouldn't have been as effective if it was Cameron or even Michael standing up for Cameron at this point. Like, it really did all fall to Bianca. Otherwise, she would have not had any kind of redemption arc at all.
No, I understand. But what I'm saying is, to me, this is the hallmark of good screenwriting, good acting, and great direction.
Oh,
It is an
absolutely.
incredible moment for the character, and it is something that, especially for its time, was groundbreaking. But you didn't need to tell me that it was, because we realize that it is because you did it so well.
I'm really glad you bring that up too, because I think this is where they really struck the perfect balance of having 2 female writers and a male director, because you really did feel both sides of it. They're writing to a strong woman, and they've created such amazing female characters. It's obvious that you're going to give the females that are watching something to latch onto, but like where it balances with having a male directing it, you still got those cool like guy moments too. And I think a lot of that also comes from the music, which is one thing we haven't talked about too. Patrick's final gesture for Kat was to get her favorite band to perform at the prom. So this is his last grand gesture before the House of Cards collapses. And it's an important one because this is really the only thing that Patrick has done that hasn't had an ulterior motive. I mean, yes, he puts himself out there when he sings for her. But the motivation was to win her back. Sure, they go out on the date after she breaks him out of detention. But even right up to prom, Joey still pays him off to take her. He did want to take her because she tries to push him away. And she tries to get out of going to prom altogether, but he does want to have that experience with her. But let's not forget, he still did take the money. So this is the one thing that he did with pure intentions of getting her favorite band to perform at the prom. And I mean, let's call it what it is. This was really all so that they could have like that killer 90s indie soundtrack. They have the prom band led by a female. Now they have her band also led by a female. It's a total girl power moment. But I love that they did it, especially because when you're shooting a scene like this is one of those things where the band is not actually performing. So all of these kids, all of the background extras, you'd never see a scene like this today because they're all paid to be there all day long. They have to keep their energy up. It's prom. They're supposed to be having a good time, and there's no actual music so that they can deliver all of the lines, so that they can, have the relationship unravel and the bet get exposed. But if you have actual music, you're not going to hear the things like Bianca's saying when she's punching out Joey. So I guess my point being, you just don't see things like this anymore with such a large scale scene. But it's all worthwhile because even though, we were talking about how prom does feel sort of rushed, it was such a huge production and it feels very real. And I like that it all does take place in the middle of the dance floor where the cards collapse. And you didn't necessarily have that record scratch moment. Like, people are looking at what's going on, but it's the immediate bystanders. You don't have like everybody's heads turning to focus in on what's happening on the dance floor. I think it's just overall a really, really well done scene.
So with prom now over, we go back to school so that she can read her assignment. My prom, I don't know how yours worked. We had prom after finals.
Mm-hmm.
It was the Wednesday or Thursday. It was a Thursday night before graduation. Graduation was on a Sunday.
Yeah. I think we might have talked about this on the show in, gosh, I can't even remember what episode, but I think we have spoken about it, how with my prom, they gave us like one day because they didn't want anybody going out and doing anything crazy. And then we had to be at a graduation rehearsal almost immediately following. I can't remember. Was it the very next morning?
Ours was the next morning.
There was definitely a graduation rehearsal somewhere in there so that you couldn't like go away for the weekend. And they were trying to mitigate, after prom activities, which were going to happen whether you had to be at the school at 9:00 in the morning or not.
No, our rehearsal, if I remember this correctly now, prom was on a Wednesday. Thursday, we went to a Yankee game. Friday, we had the rehearsal, and then we walked on Sunday. They actually did give us, they gave us the break because my brother the following year did not get the break because they were trying to keep kids from going away for a couple of days.
I think it was the same. I think it was prom was on the Wednesday. We got Thursday, and then I remember at least my friend group after the graduation rehearsal, like we kept it going. Like we all, I think we went out to Splish Splash that day or something. Yeah, so we did the rehearsal and then like we built in another after prom activity after that. But to your point, yeah, I don't know what school has class the next day after prom, but I mean, it's all worth it because this is another iconic scene from this movie. It's so well done. Again, they managed to tie it back to the Shakespeare, but they modernize it by having Kat read her poem and just fully breaking down the walls of this character. And what's really impressive is, we talked about Julia Stiles. She's 15 at this point. This was a one-take wonder shot. And she had the entire crew bawling, and they were like, nope, that's it. We're done. We're not doing it again.
Yeah. It was a good way to end it. And then Patrick goes out and buys her the Stratocaster, the guitar, with the money that Joey gave him. So the money that Joey gave him to take her out, he reinvested in her. And I liked that moment for him. Yeah,
it was the right thing to do. And it, again, shows that, he is a stand-up guy. This ending shot is just so impressive, too, the way they pull out to the wide of the school. Do we need the band singing on top of it? Not necessarily. But it's still a fun way to end it.
All right, let's move on to our cast here, starting with Heath Ledger, who plays Patrick Verona. Breakthrough role for him. Unfortunately, he's a talent that was lost too soon, but I mean, I think that it was evident from this film on, I think it was evident that he was mature beyond his years in terms of his level of talent.
I would agree. I mean, I know everybody jumped on the Heath Ledger train after Dark Knight, but for me, this is what did it. I mean, even at 13 years old, I recognized how insanely talented he was, because he really gave it that still waters run deep quality. And you knew from the second that he's on screen and they were building up his bad boy reputation, he gave it such a softness that you knew there was going to be so much more to this character. And I know I've rambled about how iconic the scene is when he sings to Kat, but I think part of the reason for that is because it's such a great moment for this character. And he's obviously having fun with it when he's running from the guards, but there's those little moments where you get the close-ups where he smiles at Kat and he just has this look where he's able to convey like there's a secret between the two of them, even though there's this big spectacle going on. And for him to be able to have that much of a nuanced performance at such a young age, I mean, like you just knew that he was going to blow up. And this is where, as great as he is as the Joker, like this is where I feel like we really missed out on some incredible work from Heath Ledger.
Julia Stiles plays Kat. I think she was absolutely perfect casting here. I think that she has kind of a nuanced performance because she plays that conflicted character very well, but she's constantly guarded. She's got that scowl on her face, which is not meant like it's not an insult the way it's sounding. Like it's not a shot at how Julia Stiles looks, but she just has that I'm over it look on her face all of the time, but she can come in and out of it so naturally. I really, really thought she was great here.
She's truly incredible. I love the performance, and I just really, really love this character because at the time, we hadn't really seen anything like this. Any other movie that we've compared to 10 Things I Hate About You, it's always been more like a She's All That, where it's like the nerdy girl that's picked out and turned into the prom queen. We've never seen a hardened person stripped down the way Kat is. And for me, what I loved about her, you know, again, we're talking, I was 13 years old. It's a very formative time in your life. For me, who was like a cripplingly insecure person, to see someone like this who genuinely did not care what anybody thought, I just absolutely loved this character. And I think it's worth noting too, you know, we've talked about obviously how great the relationship is between Patrick and Kat, but the performance too. I buy the chemistry between them so much. I really thought that there was like some off-screen relationship between Julia Stiles and Heath Ledger, and it turns out she was actually dating Joseph Gordon-Levitt while they were making this movie. I was kind of shocked to find that out.
I'll be honest with you, as much as I love Heath Ledger, as great as he was and as great as he is in this film, Joseph Gordon-Levitt might just be the most talented person in this cast. He's so good in everything that he does. He never gets the credit that he deserves. I think that he plays the boy next door, the love-struck Romeo. I think he plays that very well. He's a little sly. He's a little sneaky, but he toes the line. He should so easily become dislikable, and he doesn't. And I think that that's kind of that boyish charm that Joseph Gordon-Levitt gave him.
I would agree. It's the innocent quality that he brings to Cameron that redeems the character, that really stops him from being totally conniving to try and get the girl. But yeah, I love this performance, and I love that later him and Heath both end up in Batman.
Larissa Olenek plays Bianca. I like Larissa Olenek more than I like Bianca, if that makes any sense. I think that what makes Bianca likable, similar to like JGL, it's the talent behind the character more so than it is the character.
I think we're slightly biased because everybody grew up on Secret World of Alex Mack, right? So like you were already
watched it.
Really?
Yeah.
No, we watched it all the time, but I think that was it. Like everybody was in love with Larissa Olenek, and that's where I think The Girl Next Door is so ingrained with her. But what's really interesting about this is that she actually went out for Kat's character, and in real life, she is closer to a character like that. Maybe not as mean, but she did actually go to Sarah Lawrence. She is, you know, like more one of those like deep brooding people. But I can't see it. And I think that that's partly because of Alex Mack and growing up on her. I can't separate the Girl Next Door quality. I can't see her playing Kat at all. And you do need someone, like that's the thing, like she is very doe-eyed and innocent looking. She's got the Katie Holmes sort of thing going for her, where you do need somebody that looks like that, that's very bright-eyed and can play off the innocence to pull off Bianca, because otherwise, you know, we've talked about how she is kind of two-faced. You need that balance, otherwise you're not going to root for her at all.
I don't think there's any one talent in this film as perfectly cast as David Krumholtz.
He's so great. I mean, he steals every scene, right? Like he did it as Bernard in the Santa Claus, but here I love where a scene stealer in that movie really translates to solid acting chops.
Yes.
Because this character is just so developed from the moment he steps on screen. Like you knew somebody like this in high school, right? That's like too old for high school. They're a high school student, a 40-year-old man in a high school student's body. And that's what he conveys throughout this entire film.
You have Andrew Keegan as Joey Donner, and I like this talent. I like this character. And like you know what it is, because I think Andrew Keegan does such a good job with him, because this character of all of them should be the one that you point to and go, they could be anyone. But I don't think that that's the truth, because he's sleazy. He's supposed to be. But he's such the cornball at the same time. Like when he's doing you want to see underwear, you want to see swimsuit, and they're basically the same thing. And he's like, but I'm acting. Do you see how I did that differently? It's like watching Ryan Gosling as Ken. It, like, not quite as dumb as that character is, but like, I think that he doesn't get enough credit for how good he was in this movie.
What a great comparison. I would agree. I think he's perfect casting because he is such the pretty boy, right? But I think that's also why there is such a snarky quality about Joey, because Andrew Keegan was able to have some fun with this because he was always being cast as that pretty boy. So now you have him being so entirely self-aware. I think that's where it really works out that the character takes themselves so seriously because the actor isn't.
Yeah. Gabrielle Union plays Chastity. I didn't even know Gabrielle Union was in this movie. I had completely forgotten that she was in this until the opening credits. Like, I hate to say it, this is, and it's not meant to be an insult at Gabrielle Union, this is the character that for me could have been anybody.
Which is so funny because to me, she has one of the most iconic lines in the movie when she says, I know you can be overwhelmed, but can you ever just be whelmed? To me, that's one of the most memorable lines. But what's interesting about this is this was such a breakout role for her. She had already been acting for quite a number of years. I mean, like, yes, you had Larissa Oleynik and JGL as child actors, but for her, she had been in the business for a while. She was 25. She was older than the rest of the cast when she was making this film. But this is like really the one that put her on the map.
Allison Janney. There's nothing else. There's nothing else that needs to be said.
Perfection in everything that she does. But, well, no, what does need to be said was they made her, and I think it has to do with the terrible wig, they made her look so old in this movie and so matronly. Like, by the time Mom came out, the sitcom, and that's a show that we love, I was watching that and I was like, God, how old is she now that she was in 10 Things I Hate About You? But it's not that she's that old. It's just that they aged her up so much to play this part. But it's hysterical. It's a great character. Like I said, very little screen time, very well developed. And I also like that this entire character sort of embodies that wink and a nod that is Shakespeare, because he was filthy and he was constantly putting innuendos into his work. And now you just do it over the top through this character. It's hysterical. Final thoughts on 10 Things I Hate About You. I'll go first because I'm going to be far more brief than you, I believe. This is as close to perfect as I've graded a film without giving it a perfect score. Yeah. There are just a handful of issues and a slight handful of issues. Like, I debated making this a perfect film, but because, and to this day I will still argue that Coco is not a perfect film, I can't in good conscience argue that Coco is imperfect and then say that this one is. But this is as close to perfect as you can get. I don't think I would have appreciated this as a 13-year-old when it came out, because I didn't. I see every reason why I didn't really care for this movie when I was 13. I think that as I've gotten older, I've appreciated it more and more and more. It's one that I will absolutely revisit. And I think that it's one where if you were in the boat that I was in and you saw it as an adolescent and you didn't really care for it or completely understand it, I think you owe it to yourself to go back and give this one another try. I could not agree more. I was going to say the exact same thing. It is so close to perfect, especially because it holds up. that it grieves me to not give it perfect marks. But what stops me from putting it over the top is that they didn't actually write the poem in iambic pentameter. No, I'm just kidding. That would be so highbrow of me and so terrible. But it really would have been amazing if they managed to pull it off, because iambic pentameter it's 10 syllables. So to do the 10 things I hate about you in that format would have just been like mind-blowingly brilliant, but unfortunately they didn't. But no, that's not what is stopping it from being perfect for me. What stops it is really all of the issues that we discussed with the party scene. And in such a character-driven movie where we lose one of the characters' motivations, like that is sort of a problem. So otherwise, I think it's as close as it gets. As I said, it still absolutely holds up. And to your point, if you've seen it and you didn't really jive with it when you were younger, absolutely give it a rewatch. But if you've never seen it, definitely check it out, especially if you have kids that are tweens. I would say watch this first and make sure that you find it appropriate. But if you do, I implore you to watch it with, preteens and teens, because I think this movie's best quality is that they don't dumb it down. And you still are able to have that high school movie without it being completely raunchy, without it being all about sex. And there are still some really great takeaways and themes that I think that kids would still be able to latch onto. And we just need more movies like this.
Yeah, we're interested in hearing what you have to say about 10 Things I Hate About You. You can join the conversation on social media at Monoreel Radio on all major platforms, or you can send us an email, monoreelradio@gmail.com. News of the week is coming up, but first a quick break.
News of the Week is proudly sponsored by KMV Travel. KMV Travel is a boutique travel agency that helps families plan personalized vacations and create unforgettable memories on land and at sea. If you've dreamed of setting sail on the Disney fleet, KMV Travel will help you from booking to bon voyage. When you connect with a KMV travel specialist, they will not only assist you with your cruise package, but they will also help you with your stateroom selection, pre- and post-cruise accommodations, ground transportation, onboard activity reservations, and port activity reservations. Whether you are traveling as a couple, with a family, or a large group, your KMV travel advisor will help you customize the perfect cruise itinerary for you. Visit KMV Travel to set sail now.
Hey guys, my name is Mike. I listen to Jackie and Sean's podcast every week on my commute into work. So I reached out to Jackie, and she helped me put together the perfect getaway. I did a 4-night Disney cruise ship, and she was able to answer every question that I threw at her. She put together the perfect dates and an insurance plan that made the whole experience stress-free. She was able to help me with little tips and tricks, like you can get a Mickey Mouse bar delivered to you any time of the day. And I think that was a mistake, because now I put about 10-15 pounds on. I'll definitely be using Jackie again in the future. Thanks for everything.
We've got our first production still from Moana 2. The character looks a little bit older, a little bit more mature, and I can't tell if what's behind her is a kraken or something to the like, but obviously we're getting her up against some sort of mythical creature, because we don't rely on sequels and reboots and remakes anymore.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. She does look a little bit more mature, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the Kraken, because that was my first thought too, I'm gonna say that's Maui shape-shifting. I think this is a misdirect.
It could be. We also have a surprise trailer drop for, again, sequels. But this at least kind of makes sense because it's direct to streaming content. So to me, I kind of put it in that same realm as DCOM. Descendants: The Rise of Red is going to come to Disney Plus on June 12th. I did not see this one coming. I don't remember them talking about this. I don't remember this being teased.
I thought they had it at D23 Expo a while ago, or I remember them saying we were getting more Descendants. And I don't mind another one because they've built out that world so much. I think it's intentional because there's so much that you can do with it. But this trailer looked really cool.
It did. My reputation again.
Yeah.
So you get that a second time in one episode. We're talking about that. And I believe it's the Queen of Hearts. I think is where they're going with that.
I would
Here's
think
the
so.
thing with Descendants. While I don't, and I said, like, I understand why kids like these movies, I am just not in the target demographic. I appreciate what they're trying to do. I can appreciate that they're using IPs and that they're giving us a unique and different perspective. What I like about this is that you can kind of keep this going because there is such a deep and rich history with Disney villains.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see them delve a little deeper, and I think that in time that they can, this can become its own, MCU, so to speak. And I think that you can do some really fun things with it. I'm going to watch it. I still don't think I'm in the target demographic for it, but I appreciate what it is that they're doing here. And it'll be I'm interested to see just how deep they're willing to go with some of these characters.
Yeah, like if they sort of built everything out like a Cruella and like really showed the darkness behind some of the evolution. Well, but they're not. They're the descendants. It's the kids.
Right.
So these aren't necessarily origin stories. But yeah, to see them go a little bit deeper, a little bit darker because the villains have had their falling out. And maybe the kids want to avenge them. Like that could be really cool.
We have a new YouTube series that dropped called We Call It Imagineering. What I don't understand,
Yep.
You know what I'm going to say.
Yep, because it was my first thought too.
Why is it going to YouTube?
Thank you. Let's pull prop culture off of Disney Plus and then send the Imagineers to YouTube. That was my gut reaction, and honestly, full disclosure, I was like super annoyed by the whole thing, but I started thinking about it, and obviously, we got another quarterly earnings call, which we're not going to mess with right now. We will talk about that. We got a dockside chat coming up sooner rather than later, so we'll start breaking that kind of thing down when we have tequila in front of us. Anyway, my wheels started turning, and I realized there is obviously so much coming to the parks this summer, most notably Tiana's Bayou Adventure. And I think what's happening here is that they've recognized that there is a subscriber drop-off. So why are you going to lock a series like this up on Disney Plus, which is essentially an advertisement for your parks, and have people not see it? So I'm thinking it's just going to be a giant commercial on YouTube. But what I don't love about that is, everybody loves the Imagineering story. Everybody loves Behind the Attraction. Why not give it the treatment of a series? Why does it have to be like a commercial or like why does it have to be short form content? People want more of this stuff. The other thing, and I'm only realizing this now as I'm saying it out loud, is I'm wondering if they didn't put it on Disney Plus because of Behind the Attraction. Is it too much of the same?
It doesn't matter though.
No, especially if you're not, Behind the Attraction is showing how rides work. And yes, they have the Imagineer interviews. It would be cooler to do this like reality style of showing the actual build with stakes of, okay, you've got the opening of this attraction. Like, we got to get this done. Like, make your Imagineers characters.
Well, do you remember what a big deal it was in the 90s when Disney would open a new attraction or a new land or a new park? And it would be like a big TV special, like on a Friday night.
Yes.
I feel like, to your point, you could do that exact same thing, make it episodic, build towards it, air it on Disney Plus. I think that you could still give us content and give the Imagineers their flowers and still use it as an advertisement. I think that there's a way to do that and just give us some more interesting and unique content on the streamer.
Do it on both. Put one on ABC and then put it also on Disney Plus. But like, why YouTube?
Yeah. The Imagineers did go to the Yucatan to do research for the upcoming renovation / gutting of Dino Land over at Animal Kingdom. And you see them taking pictures of and hand drawing temples. What this tells me is it confirms what we already know, which Disney told us that but then backed away from, and that's that Indiana Jones is coming to Disney's Animal Kingdom Park, and that Indiana Jones is going to take the place of Dinosaur, because it can't be Encanto, because Encanto does not take place in Mexico. You can make the case that it's Coco, but we don't really see a lot of Mayan temples in Coco.
Fair point.
So this tells me that the only thing it could possibly be at this point is Indiana Jones.
See, that is a very well thought out response, and I appreciate it, because all of these reaction videos that went to TikTok immediately kept saying that, oh, this is Encanto. And I know that that's what they showed us in the concept art originally at the last D23 Expo. But I thought the same thing. I was like, different country, different region. So I think you're right about Indiana Jones. What I appreciate, though, is that they just did a good old fashioned research trip. And I'm happy to see that that's not something that is falling victim to budget cuts, where they're just going to do online research or, send a local out to gather what the Imagineers are eventually going to use. I'm glad that they got to go do it themselves. What I'm just surprised at is that they're releasing this now, and they did it as part of the earnings call as opposed to for D23. It gives me hope that something very big is getting announced at D23, because we're starting to see follow-up from all of the things that were announced at the last expo. But the fact that they're not holding these updates and making it sound like, wow, we're doing all these things, but we've already told you about them, hope no one notices. I'm wondering if they've got something really big up their sleeve.
You can write this in permanent ink and tattoo it on my arm. The reason why this came out now is for the earnings call, because at the end of the day, Disney is a business, the stock is still not doing great, and they need to start pushing it in the right direction, especially with Epic Universe coming. What they will do, I believe, at D23 Expo is we're going to get a, here it is. Here's the rendering. Here's what's coming.
Yeah.
Because if they don't, then you shouldn't have had a D23 Expo. If you're not coming to us with, here's what it is, here's when it's opening, here's what it's going to be, then you shouldn't be doing an expo.
No, and time-wise, you've done the research trip. You've got 4 months from now to get your concept art ready.
Correct. VI pass holder days are coming back to Walt Disney World. They're going to run from May 1st to June 26th. You're going to have pass holder magnets. You're going to have pass holder lounges. I'm happy to see that this is being brought back. We enjoyed last year when we were able to go. The lounges were okay. Basically, you could get a cup of water and a bag of Zarg nuts for as long as they had them available. In fact, I think our trips to the lounge, we couldn't get the Zarg nuts. It was a coworker of mine that got them, didn't want them, and gave them to us. They ran out of the Zarg nuts early.
And then I think they were supposed to have like M&Ms,
it was M&Ms
or
and
something.
Then they ran out of those.
Yeah.
I remember by the last week, they had basically nothing. The charging stations, they were, charge your phone, I think those were gone. By the last time we went, it was literally just, there's a jug of water and a paper cup. Welcome to the pass holder lounge.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they've adjusted for that as far as the supply and demand at the very least. And I'm hoping that maybe there's a different location. That would be kind of nice. That's a little bit more separated and maybe a little bit larger, so that you don't have to, that was the other thing too. We were able to get a table with no issue. It was just the way they filtered you in and filtered you out because of the way that it's set up within the pavilion. It was just very tight in there.
Yeah, at the land pavilion. I'm thinking, I didn't mind where it was located. I felt it could have been bigger. I felt that they could have done a little bit more, but it was also their first time around, which in and of itself is alarming. I think this time around, you should, I'm not saying you will, you should see a more refined approach. You should see enough supply to meet the demand, I anticipate this will be a bit of a step up. What we really need, I think, is something more permanent.
Agreed.
We've said so many times before that as a Universal Orlando pass holder, you kind of get more in terms of the appreciation than you do for being a Disney pass holder. And it's a lot less money for no blackout dates.
Right.
I think that Disney's trending in the right direction, but I think you just need to do a little bit more, especially because you suspended those annual passes for so long, then you brought them back, then you took them away again. I think that you do need to thank the people that are going to be here year-round. And that's not something that I feel because we are pass holders and because we are Disney World locals. I felt this way even when we were back in New York before we moved here. It surprised me when you would see online that Universal would have exclusive pass holder parties, that they would have exclusive pass holder viewing areas for parades, that they had a lounge, that they had special merchandise, and Disney wasn't following suit. I think that they need to make that jump to catch up to Universal, certainly by next year when Epic Universe opens.
And especially because Epic Universe is going to be such a draw, who is going to keep you afloat when things get slow?
I think you're going to see an influx of tourism here next year, but I don't think a lot of it will be drawn to Disney. A lot of it's going to be to Universal. But we are interested in knowing what you have to say about this week's news. You can let us know how you feel on all major social media platforms at Monoreel Radio, or you can shoot us an email, monoreelradio@gmail.com. Thank you all so much for joining us this and every week on Monoreel Radio. Monoreel Radio will always be free, but there are many ways that you can help support the show. Please give us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. Join the conversation on social media at Monoreel Radio on all major platforms. Share your favorite episodes with family and friends who may enjoy them. And of course, book your next trip with Jackie. Links to everything can be found at monoreelradio.com. We all get one story. Make yours a magical one.
On behalf of Monoreel Radio, we'd like to thank you for joining us. We'll see you at the movies, the stuff dreams are made of.